A brief and necessarily incomplete history of the Champions Guild in Eryndor, compiled by Aldous Grimwhistle, unofficial, High Archivist, year 1026, early spring, 4th revision. A note before you read further. I have now written 4 versions of this document. The first was rendered obsolete within a fortnight. The second lasted 6 weeks before an event I can only describe as the Flying Castle situation required substantial amendment. The third lasted approximately 2 months before a revolution, several deaths, a resurrection, a wedding, and a stolen airship rendered it so incomplete as to be actively misleading. I present this 4th version with cautious optimism and no guarantees whatsoever. On our arrival, the Guild did not choose to come to Eryndor. That is perhaps the most important sentence in this document, and I ask that you sit with it before continuing. They were not explorers, they were not conquerors, they did not answer an advertisement. Something brought them here, through what we have come to call the Turnkey Tower, a structure of unknown origin that stands at the edge of Chiliran and, for a modest fee, generates dungeons from thin air for the entertainment of paying patrons. Whether the tower brought them here with purpose, or merely as a consequence of forces no one yet understands, is a question I have spent considerable time investigating. I have not answered it yet. I have, however, developed theories. I keep them locked in the second archive. They arrived changed. Those of you reading this who came through the tower know what I mean. Those of you who joined later, as I did, from Chiliran itself, have been mercifully spared something. The originals lack the vocabulary to fully describe. They arrived in bodies that were not entirely their own, from a world that no longer exists, consumed by an event the founding members refer to simply as before the world burned. We do not speak of it often. Understanding what happened remains an open matter in Archive Drawer 7. What I can tell you is this. They arrived in Lexavar, the Gnomish Republic, in the summer of year 1025. No money, no reputation, no institutional history, and approximately 50,000 gold of debt. They had each other, and they had the tower, and they had a city, Chiliran, generous enough to let them set up operations in its Prairie Park district while they figured out what they were doing. We are still, to some degree, figuring out what we are doing. But we have made considerable progress. The early months: work, reputation, and character. A guild is nothing without a reputation, and a reputation is nothing without work. In our first months, we did the work available: investigating local crimes, escorting convoys, assisting communities in distress. We cleared sewers. We returned a very large cat from a tree. We made connections with the gnomish community, with a priest named Nox, who consistently brought us cases involving people who needed help and had nowhere else to turn. In these early months, we also became involved in a conflict between rival factions of sentient baked goods. I am aware of how that sentence reads. I include it because of how it ended. We chose to protect the refugees, to escort a community of beings who had weeks to live to safety, at cost, without obligation. That choice cost more than its strategic value would suggest it should have. We did it anyway. I believe it is the moment the Champions Guild became something more than a company of mercenaries. That instinct, messy, expensive, strategically inconvenient, has informed every significant decision we have made since. Keep it in mind. The continent. What we found, by summer of year 1025, we had begun to understand what Eryndor actually is. The continent is fractured, 8 nations and 2 independent city-states, each with its own interests, its own internal factions, its own criminal apparatus. The Champions Guild, arriving from outside any of these power structures with loyalty to none of them, became something useful, a neutral party. We had no old grudges, no political obligations, no blood ties to any throne or council. People hired us not because we were powerful, but because we were from somewhere else. This neutrality has become increasingly complicated to maintain, but the value of it, and the responsibility it places on us, is something every member of this guild should understand. What we found, over the course of our first year, was a continent with several structural fractures running beneath its political surface. The Velvet Ledger is a halfling criminal syndicate operating from Thalenmark, Eryndor's financial capital, with agents embedded in virtually every city on the continent. They are not merely criminals. They operate with ideology. That information, money, and leverage over governments constitute a form of power superior to armies. On the available evidence, they are correct. By autumn of year 1025, we had confirmed that they had achieved significant penetration of Thalenmark's Gilded Council. What we did not yet appreciate was the scale of what they were building toward. The Cracked Scale is a dragonborn criminal organization operating from the Drakmir Dominion. More physically dangerous than the Velvet Ledger, less strategically sophisticated, and nursing a specific grievance against this guild dating from an incident involving a baby dragon we declined to hand over. We have spent significant effort this winter dismantling their operations in the city of Rakath. The work is largely complete. The gold sales coordinated, in September of year 1025, a simultaneous attack on the guild from 4 criminal factions at once: the Cracked Scale, the Brotherhood of the Rat, the Golden Chain, and the Velvet Ledger, striking us in a single day. The message was clear. We received it. One of our allied shipyards was destroyed in the attack, and a shipwright we cared about was taken. We would not find him for months, and what we found was not what we had hoped. An abyssal replacement network has been operating on the continent since at least our second month here. Individuals are being replaced by indistinguishable constructs, occupying positions of trust, smuggling materials into cities. The scope is unknown. The ultimate purpose is unknown. A known operative walked free when confronted for lack of actionable evidence. This file remains open, and I am personally, professionally frustrated by it. And beneath all of these political problems, there are older things. A divine entity imprisoned for so long that the Eryndorian calendar does not reach back to its incarceration. A creature of great power, recently freed as an indirect consequence of our own actions, half divine and half serpent, now loose in the world. A disease spreading along the coastlines with no known cure. These are not political problems. They are something older. The vampire problem, which is multiple problems. Eryndor has a significant vampire problem, and we are, with regret, partially responsible for its current scale. In August of year 1025, several of our members attended what they believed was a masquerade party. It was a gathering of vampire thralls under the control of a vampire lord. Our members killed the vampire lord. They also, in doing so, released every thrall he had been controlling into the world without a master, unsupervised. I will not assign blame. I will note that the decision to kill a vampire lord is understandable, and that the consequences were significant and ongoing. The Crimson Corsairs, a pirate organization with vampire leadership, were operating a secret underground factory in Castleshire. The shipwright taken in the gold sales attack had been converted, against his will, into a vampire and was running that factory. He escaped when we found him. He is still out there. And there are the Ancient Ones, which I will come to shortly, and which are in an entirely different category. The wedding at Rail, and what followed it, on the 4th of October, year 1025, one of our founding members, a skeletal nobleman of considerable reputation, married the daughter of a noble house in the city of Rail in a ceremony that became, in sequence, scandalous, legally contentious, then under armed attack. The wedding party was ambushed on the road to the city. The ceremony was nearly derailed by ecclesiastical objections. A senator, citing the authority of the Republic's civil code in a room full of hostile nobility, legally bound the marriage herself. It was the most efficient thing anyone did all evening. That same night, the party discovered the bride's family manor had been occupied by a vampire agent of an organization called the Unshadowed. She had converted the estate into a staging ground for an undead assault intended to cripple Rail. Our people fought her in the Great Hall and killed her. Her last words, "You've mistaken the lock for the door," have not been satisfactorily explained. I have a drawer for unexplained last words. It is filling up. Rail survived the night. The marriage survived. Less than a month later, at a ritual gathering in a forest village called Duskwillow, the same couple, along with the senator who had performed their wedding, were abducted by twin arch-hags who had been posing as a seeress. The ritual was not a prophecy reading. It was a binding, performed in front of witnesses who had no idea what they were watching. All three were taken through a planar shift before our response team could act. Twin vampires coordinated the aftermath. Duskwillow was destroyed. It has been quarantined since. The groom was subsequently recovered from the flying castle we brought down the following month. The bride and the senator remain unaccounted for. The castle, and its architect. In November of year 1025, the Champions Guild assaulted a flying fortress of necromantic origin with 3 coordinated teams. We had been sent into this castle, repeatedly, for months. Different teams, different objectives, but the same destination. The man coordinating those assignments had presented himself as a harmless retired adventurer with a fondness for forgotten ruins and a generous budget. He was not harmless. He was not retired. He was very old and very dangerous, and he was waiting for us on the command bridge when we arrived. He fell. The castle fell. The Drakmir Dominion has maintained a containment perimeter around the crash site ever since. We confirmed his death twice because the situation warranted it. Fort Dravonis. In December of year 1025, a small team traveled to a ruined fortress to obtain the breath of a time dragon, an ingredient required to prevent a temporal fracture in Celerin's clock tower. One member fell in the fighting inside the fortress and was revived. Another held a doorway alone against the time dragon, so a third could escape with what was needed. He did not survive. The cure was delivered. The clock tower still stands. I do not write about this at length because I do not think it can be made to fit into a paragraph. He deserves to be in the record. The record is what remains. Resurrection, marriage, and the gods getting involved. In the weeks that followed Fort Dravonis, several of our members undertook a pilgrimage, on behalf of the god Lathander, to earn the restoration of a fallen colleague. The terms were not simple. 9 specific items gathered across the continent. Every test was completed. Lathander accepted the offering. He also, characteristically, assigned ongoing obligations to the people who completed the quest. 3 members were given divine titles and responsibilities. A 4th was asked to kill a specific person on Lathander's behalf. The target was not named, and the agreement has not yet been fulfilled. I have opened a separate file for divine obligations. I expect it to grow. On the 27th of December, year 1025, 2 of our members were married at the Circle of Morfarin in Sylvandar, with the blessing of the Seelie Court of the Feywild. This was the conclusion of a quest that had required, among other things, travelling into the Feywild's markets, navigating its politics, and defeating an archfey in a fair duel. The victor's name is in the marriage record. The archfey was reportedly embarrassed. As a consequence of the wedding, a permanent portal to the Feywild now exists at the Circle of Morfarin. It is under the stewardship of our members. This is either a significant diplomatic asset or an ongoing logistical complication, possibly both. Neerwin, and the things that were before the calendar, in January of year 1026, a team entered the ruins of Neerwin in the forest wastes of Thelenmark. The ruins are ancient, pre-calendar ancient, which is to say, older than any timeline maintained by any nation on this continent. What lives inside them is also pre-calendar ancient. Our team encountered a being in the lower levels that we can only describe as a vampire of extraordinary age. A creature for whom our most capable members was simply not a relevant consideration. It moved through them. One of our members took a ring from the ruins. The ancient being killed her effortlessly. Her body was returned to the surface with a message. Do not take what is not yours. The identity of this being is unknown. What it is guarding is unknown. Whether it will remain content in its ruins is unknown. I have placed the file in the cabinet labeled Do Not Open Without Senior Archivist Present, __ the Obsidian Chain and the Starforges. In the winter of year 1026, our members discovered that an organization called the Obsidian Chain had been systematically looting the bastions of Solara, a semi-independent religious forge city in Lexavar, using the spell Modify Memory to conceal their operations from the Smith-Priest Wardens. 7 oath-bound magical items had been smuggled out. Their leader, Toston Silverleaf, attacked our teams twice during the clearance operation and twice escaped. The Obsidian Chain does not operate like a criminal organization seeking profit. They are seeking specific objects. What they intend to do with those objects is the question I would most like to answer. __A Deathworth recording. On the 12th of March, year 1026, a team of our members was dispatched to infiltrate a shadow meeting between Eryndor's major criminal organizations. The mission produced critical intelligence. It also produced a tactical engagement our team could not survive intact. One of our acolytes, named Herald of Lathander 2 months earlier, a veteran of some of our most significant operations, covered the team's withdrawal. He held the gap long enough for the others to escape with what they had come for. He died doing it. The intelligence he died to secure was a direct component of what happened in Talvareth 9 days later. I do not know if he knew that when he made his choice. I suspect he would not have needed to. The revolution, the airship, and the city that burned. In March of year 1026, the halfling capital of Talvareth entered open revolution. We did not start this. I want to be precise about that, because the distinction matters. What we did, over the course of several months, was repeatedly intersect with the apparatus being assembled to start it. Without initially understanding what we were looking at, we recovered financial documents. We disrupted narcotic shipments. We delivered intelligence. Some of us were used as unwitting instruments by people who understood the plan better than we did. When the revolution came, it had structure. The most expensive mercenary company in Eryndor was killing civilians in the streets. Religious factions attacked temples of the merchant goddess. The goblinoid criminal network was already in position. This was not a popular uprising. This was a designed event, assembled over months and executed with precision, with the Velvet Ledger's fingerprints on every component. On the 19th of March, 2 days before the city broke open, a guild team stole the Velvet Ledger's airship from the Talvareth docks. This was deliberate. The ship is ours now. On the 21st of March, the revolution came. Our people scattered across the city did what they could, evacuating civilians, disabling strategic emplacements, pulling our own members out of the tunnels. The airship made 2 evacuation runs. 3 members chose to remain behind. Their status is unknown. 1 member was left behind in the initial chaos. He survived the first night of the riots. He found a young girl, alone in her home, and spent that night protecting her through the burning streets to her family's manor. He did not survive what came after. He is in the record. Barrow Bank, and where we stand now. On the 24th of March, year 1026, our members defended the vault city of Barrow Bank against a 3-way siege, the Velvet Ledger, the Dusk Watch, and a contingent of Goliath raiders, all moving on the vault simultaneously. The city held. On the 26th, we began clearing the asylum, a Ciliran facility occupied by hostile forces. The first floor is secured. The work continues. A current accounting. We are based in Ciliran. It has its own problems, but it is functional, and it is home. We have an airship, a permanent Feywild portal, a network of allies built over a year of unglamorous work, stock in a transcontinental railroad, and the goodwill of communities across several nations who remember when someone showed up and helped without being asked. We have enemies. The Velvet Ledger controls Thalenmark now and will consolidate. The cracked scale is diminished but intact. The Ancient of Nerwin is aware of us. The Obsidian Chain is collecting things we cannot identify. The quarry plot continues. A pre-calendar vampire moves somewhere on the continent. An individual who kills people and leaves them smiling has escaped custody in Thundrakar. An organization called Polaris, operating with fiendish augmentation, has been encountered multiple times, and we do not yet understand what it wants. We have missing persons. A wife and a senator taken through a planar rift. A shipwright who is now a vampire somewhere at sea. And one of our own who did not make it onto the airship. Not because he was left behind, but because he chose to stay. He spent the night of the revolution protecting a young girl through the burning streets to her family's manor. He did not survive what came after. He is in the record, and he deserves to be. We have open questions. The largest, the one I return to more than any other, is the same one I wrote in the first version of this document. Why are we here? I do not believe the Tower brought this guild to Eryndor by accident. The world they came from burned. Eryndor is burning in slower, more political ways, and in some places, faster ones. They were deposited here without consent, changed in ways they don't fully understand, into a continent that seems to have been waiting for something they turned out to be. I have spent considerable time thinking about what, exactly, that is. What I keep arriving at, we are people who chose, over and over at considerable cost, to keep choosing. To take the escort job for the refugees who couldn't pay, to hold the bridge, to stay in a burning city and get a child safely home. Eryndor has many ancient powers, careful political arrangements, and well-resourced factions. None of them do that. Not reliably. Not when it's expensive. Perhaps that is why we're here. Perhaps it is simply a description of who we became. I am not sure those are different answers. ___. If you have questions about the contents of this document, my office is the third door past the filing cabinets on the eastern corridor. Please knock. The second cabinet from the left opens unexpectedly, and I prefer advance warning. The drawer labeled Do Not Open contains files that genuinely should not be opened without supervision. I am trusting you to interpret supervision in good faith. A. Grimwhistle, High Archivist Champions Guild, Kaliran March 1026.